Hey folks, this is Billy from Dank Wargaming. I'm here today with Aaron of Heralds of War Gaming Club on Dank Encounters of the Fifth Kind. Welcome, Aaron.
Yeah, hi, thanks for having me.
So, Aaron, you are recently the winner of the Vorpal Gaming Intro Tournament, and we were just wanting to get your thoughts today on that experience. One of the things we want to know first of all is where can we find you? Like, where do you tend to travel and play? Was it a long trip for you to come to Vorpal in Knox, Indiana, or was it a short trip?
As about an average size trip, I'm based up in Southwest Michigan, so anything kind of local to Knox for me. It's not a couple hours drive is not too bad, but I tend to travel around when I've got the time to do so. I go down to Atlanta once a year for the Warzone events, but I try to do a lot of the local things, the Michigan GT, and other events like that.
Oh, we might have had a lag. I was asking what your thoughts were on how the format influenced your list.
Got you. So yeah, so it was interesting. First, I'll say it was great that to experiment with things when we're early on in edition. I think with the large table size, that really thought to me, if bigger models like knights or things were coming, I wanted to be able to have the range. On the newer size table boards, really, once you consider a model's movement and then its shooting range, really you're shooting very quickly. Whereas obviously, as you put it on the old standard eighth edition, that the 6x4s, it's you've got more range, so you want to get those longer barrel guns. So that was the first thing I was thinking of. And then, firstly, when we were using those GT mission packs, the objective placement for those is still based on the smaller size board. So I thought, well, these objectives are going to be kind of more clustered together in the center of the board. And so I wanted to make sure that I could get decent firing lanes and models that could potentially ignore line of sight with some of their shooting, but also have the movement to navigate some of those obscuring pieces of terrain.
Excellent. That's an excellent series of thoughts there. Because that was some of the things when we were working on the tournament pack we were talking about. It's like, oh, we'll have lots of room to maneuver, but the fact that the missions are dictated to come from the middle, that means there will be lots of areas on the outside where you can do flanking maneuvers and things like that. But at the end of the day, the game is all about getting to the middle of the board. So I'm glad that message seemed to carry over to the players when they were looking at it, that okay, this is going to have a big deal on my list or have a big impact on my list.
Yeah, very much. I think that just one other thought I had. I mean, when I was thinking about the big boards and how Ninth has kind of evolved into this objective style game, I built my list thinking people are going to bring these Death Star type units, these trying big unkillable units. And so I really needed to think about, well, how am I going to overcome that obstacle if 10 Blight Lord Terminators suddenly come up in the middle of the board with all the saves that they have.
Right. I've been helping a buddy up here with his Eldar list, and it's Wraith Blades with all the spells and everything
Yeah.
on them to try and make them unkillable. So yeah, that's definitely something that I'm seeing, and then throwing them in a transport on top of it to make it even harder to kill them.
Yeah, got to get through that transport first.
So going into round one, what was your opponent playing?
He was playing Thousand Suns, so Zinch based list with Magnus and a little bit of shooting and a few Rubric Marines.
So what seemed to be the pivotal moment in that matchup for you?
So it was going to be a tough list for him to face me. I mean, obviously, I don't know if we've mentioned this yet. I was able to bring the Taunar supremacy armor, so I ran Tau. And I will say here, obviously, I know the points just increased for the Taunar. I was very lucky to get in kind of under that. Our tournament happened, before that happened, the increase in points. And so I knew that, if I was to go first, he was running Magnus, as I said, priority target right there can't be obscured. And my opponent, knowing this, chose to put Magnus in reserve, in tactical reserve, coming in from a board edge. And while this meant that he could obviously have Magnus survive, come in, get his +1 invulnerable save, his -1 to be hit, really, all that was left for me to do for a turn or two was kind of mop up some rubrics, kill a predator, and maybe a couple of demon princes. And the Taunar is just such an effective killing machine, especially when being supported by characters for re-rolls and the 16-inch move. So really, by the time Magnus came in, Magnus was really the only threat left on the board for me to have to deal with.
And you dealt with him, I assume.
Well, it was surprising actually. So I remember my opponent, as Magnus does, got off his spells, and thankfully I used a few drones and some fire warriors to make it so he wasn't making a charge even with warp time to my Taunar, because that's a party my Taunar does not want to be a part of. But he got the spells off, and then I literally, just kind of turned my torso, and I literally put everything this Taunar had into Magnus, and I got him down to one wound. And even at one wound, I don't want to be dancing with Magnus. So I was a little bit hesitant. He popped a spell and healed 6 wounds, which was phenomenal. But then he couldn't get to my Taunar. One more turn of shooting, I was obviously able to take off the remaining wounds. But great opponent. He had a great mentality coming into the game. Knowing that you're facing a Forge World model like a Taunar is always somewhat daunting.
Yeah.
But it was a tough go for him from the start.
But it sounds like he was a good sportsman about it.
100%. I would love to play him again. I'm building 1,000 Suns list as we speak, so getting his thoughts on that. I mean, I've not run Magnus yet, so kind of just his thoughts on how he runs Magnus, and these rubric marines look like a pain to paint, so maybe get some insight from him on how to go about doing that.
Awesome. So what about round 2? What did you face?
Round 2, I faced one of the 2 lists that actually I was fearing the most. It was a very shooty Adeptus Mechanicus list, and it had a great pilot running that list. The guy running it, I don't remember his name, but again, another great opponent. I can't fault any of the opponents I played, actually. All great sportsmen, great competitive attitude, friendly. He brought this really strong AvMac list. It had the 3 tanks that everyone's running now that can ignore line of sight. Obviously, it's got the missiles on them. He also ran the chicken walkers, but with auto cannons. And what was cute is obviously the new warlord traits that AvMac have can be so strong as well, with being able to replace a canticle. So I was very worried about this list, because now all of a sudden he can be having strength 8 auto cannons. And so, between that, the tanks, the transports, and just some other basic shooting that he had, it was really a game that I was going to win or lose, in my opinion, in deployment. And so, it was a phenomenal game, very close game. He went first, but again, not to, he played a phenomenal game, but he put those chicken walkers in reserve turn 1. And really what that meant is I had 16 less shots to worry about, turn 1 coming in, that they were obviously doing 2, possibly 3 damage a shot, which meant I only lost maybe half, a third of my drones. And then on my turn 1, I picked up a lot of his stuff, probably 2 tanks, a bunch of guys. So when those chicken walkers came in, he kind of left out a lot of shooting on his turn 1, so I have more survivability.
That's an interesting way to look at it. It would have been the idea that if going first, it would have been better to have everything on there to just have that one big alpha strike instead of trying to play. I mean, to be fair, more conservative. I tend to play more conservatively, so I don't fault him for trying to do that. But it's interesting that it played out that way.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things now, obviously sees the initiative's gone, the +1's gone, it really is just a straight roll off. And, so you can look at that almost like a 50-50, right? You just don't know. And if it were me playing against me, I think that's one of those games where if he risked it for the biscuit and just put everything on the board, and just said, right, if I go first, I've got a chance. If I don't go first, it's a game of toy soldiers. But I think in some ways, yeah, like I said, it was all won or lost in that deployment zone. If he'd just thrown everything into me turn one, maybe a different game.
Excellent, excellent. So what about round three?
Round three, I actually faced a good friend of mine, Sean, who's part of the Heralds of War Club that obviously, I'm part of as well, running a very nasty guard list. Three Lehman Russes, Punisher that had the tank ace, so minus one AP, 40 shots, strength five, minus one AP is no joke. And then two of the Demolisher tanks, these strength 10 d6 damage tanks. And he was coming into that game, and obviously we had lunch right before the final game, and he was telling me how he played knights and had a really strong game against those knights. I'm thinking, wow, if you can take down knights, you can take down a towner. And so I was a little bit worried. I definitely had to use the terrain to my advantage again. Shield drones are stupid. I put them behind an obscuring piece of terrain so that Punisher, these bolters, they weren't really able to target them unless he had a manticore that could obviously ignore line of sight, but wanted to put that manticore into the towner. He went first again. Big, I think over lunch we said if I go first, it's probably 90% my game. If he goes first, it's really, how good is your alpha strike going to be? He positioned really well. He moved up. He shot me with the Demolishers, with the Punisher cannon, with two Chimeras worth of shooting, and even the Manticore with the full payload, which really has now become my new favorite guard unit. I think that's just hilarious. And he put everything into me, and it was miraculous. I must have had a 75% conversion rate on my 5-up feel no pains.
Wow.
So I was pushing wounds. I mean, he maxed out. He got 12 shots with this Demolisher cannon.
Ooh.
And he put it right into my towner. And then the other one got like 7 or 8. So I'm facing 18 shots. And I think I lost 3 drones,
Oh.
4 drones. I was just like, wow, it wasn't supposed to happen that way, right? But that's dice. I have a
That's why
good
we play
friend
the
that
game.
plays. Yeah, exactly. I have a friend that plays Death Guard. He rolls 7 dice. He rolls 7 5-ups, and sometimes that just happens. And these shield drones did the same thing. And then obviously, my turn one, my target priority is pretty easy: kill anything that has a strength gun higher than 8. So I focused on the demolishers. I focused on the manticore. And then we kind of just did that dance where I picked things off. He tried to pick things off. He played the objective game extremely well, and he got my town R down to about 14 wounds at one point. Which, okay, 14 wounds is still ridiculous, but when you're almost 900 points of my army in a 1,500 point tournament is tied up in one model. When you go below half damage, it gets you get a little worried, especially as you're only going around with a 3-up save, 5-up invulnerable, and when your drones start to fall off, you're like, it's going to start hurting now.
Yeah, for sure. And so by winning that game, you went 3-0, won the tournament. So
Yeah.
is that the first time you've won a tournament at Vorpal?
It's the first time I've won a singles tournament at Vorpal. I believe there was a doubles tournament back in 8th,
Okay.
if I'm not mistaken. And I won't take any credit for that doubles tournament. I was just a passenger on the ride, just rolling dice when I was told to roll dice. But yeah, no, it was my second time, over there, and it's a great venue. There's lots of space, and I think what we 10 tables quite comfortably into that space, and for the doubles we had a really good turnout. That was last year pre-corona apocalypse, and that was another good event. And yeah, I was happy to come. I was happy to win, meet new people, lots of new people there that I hadn't met before. and hopefully it's the start of a great competitive scene in obviously the northern Indiana area, and hopefully there'll be future events.
Well, there is one in December at Vorpal for doubles, so you thinking about going back, being less of a passenger this time?
Maybe. My buddy that I played with last time just picked up a massive lot of orcs. We're talking over 400 boys, and
Wow.
he spent most of this, quarantine time, if we call it that, just painting these boys. We'll just say that contrast paints were definitely his friend, and we've obviously play tested some singles and realizing that unless you were like in athletic shape, it would just be impossible to run this list as a singles event. You'd probably keel over and die. But as a doubles event, I think working in tandem, moving 360 boys, because you want to be respectful of your opponent's time as well. It's why chess clocks can be important in tournaments. We're working on that, and I think bringing an orc list that just saturates the board, especially if you're thinking about going down to the smaller board size for the doubles, it will be interesting. Depends on the points level. Maybe the 6x4 would be a better format, but running that, and I think just with orcs, I don't know it's competitive, but it's just fun. I mean, it's just orcs. They just charge things.
So, Aaron, is there anywhere where people can follow your 40K journey? Do you have social media or YouTube channel?
No, I honestly don't. It's just a hobby for me. It's up here in Michigan where we have these 7-month winters. I just needed something that could keep me entertained, and I enjoy the hobby side, the building, the painting, and that's really what attracted me more to the hobby. And then you know it's then the socializing aspect, going and actually chatting to people in person. It's, as I said earlier, it's toy soldiers. Win or lose, I really don't mind. It's having a great opponent, which again I had 3 great opponents, and just having that conversation about how silly this game can be,
Yeah.
and also just some of those fun moments that happen when something unexpected happens, and taking enjoyment from that. But in terms of documenting or talking about things, this is honestly my probably first experience talking about 40K on a more national scale.
Excellent, excellent. Well, we'd like to be national at some point, but I'm not quite sure we're there yet. But I'd like to be there someday. But thank you very much
So
for coming on
I'll
today.
tell my family about this in England, and then you'll be international overnight.
Oh, wow.
We'll do that.
Well, thank you so much for coming on today, Aaron.
No, I appreciate you having me. Like I said, it's a great tournament. Great to be on to talk about it. I appreciate everything that was done to make the tournament happen.
Thank you. All right. Well, if you like this video, please like, comment, and share. If you want to know more about Dankless Wargaming, please check the description below. Till next time, remember that if your lists start to tank, then it's time to get dank, and dank includes running a town art 1500 points.